This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Back here, hour two of Money Moves, big football hour on deck as we welcome you back here to VSiN, the sports betting network, alongside Ben Stevens, Stormy, Buonantony with you. We will dive deeper into the college football playoff semifinals that are set to get underway on Thursday and Friday. Of course, wild card weekend upon us. I said last segment before the break, I don't know what we want to call the Monday after the regular season comes to an end in the NFL. I know Black Monday is kind of the standard moniker, but I feel like the Purge is probably another one, or whatever it was. I was even worried for my own job, the way some of these guys are dropping like flies. Any big surprises for you, or maybe a name you thought might have reached its end that we haven't heard yet?
Not necessarily surprised by any of the moves. I do believe Shane Steichen deserved another year in Indianapolis. I thought Jonathan Gannon would be on his way out. I would not say it was stunning to see Cleveland part ways with Kevin Stefanski, but that feels like a very Browns move. They fire a guy that is now going to be a top candidate for any of the other 5 head coaching vacancies that we currently have in the National Football League. I think the one, Stormy, that really stands out to me, not a dismissal, but the fact that he is returning for 2026, is Mike McDaniel. I'm not really sure where you want to shed the confidence on this guy or say that he is turning things in the right direction for this Fins team. You have the disaster at the quarterback spot with Tua Tagovailoa, who said yesterday it would be really cool to get a fresh start somewhere else in 2026. The offense has not been nearly as prolific as you would expect for a McDaniel scheme. And when you look at the numbers, 3-18 after this 4-year run now against teams above 500, I'm not entirely sure as an organization how you can point to that metric, to that number, to that record. 3-18 against teams that at the time had a winning record when you squared off against them and say, this is the guy to continue to build our franchise and move us forward into the future. That was the one maybe I was most surprised that he stayed and still has a job, Mike McDaniel in Miami.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I wonder if, and I know we've heard that term that he's safe, I wonder how much of that is for now, and if there is still potential that could change. I do not think this is the end of the road and the last we hear of coaches getting fired. There have only been 6, and of course 2 of them were during the regular season with Brian Callahan and Brian Daboll, of course. And so I feel like there's potential still for more chaos to ensue with some of these teams. And you mentioned Stefanski among those. He has already, according to Adam Schefter, reportedly been expected to speak with the Falcons, Giants, and Titans as of now. So it doesn't seem like he's going to be out of work potentially for particularly long. But the other ones of note, of course, Pete Carroll out with the Raiders, gone after just 1 year, 3-13. They lose 10 of 11 games by double digits in 9, last or near last in just about every major offensive category. At least they start fresh with the number 1 overall pick, whoever they do ultimately bring in there. The Falcons get let go of Raheem Morris. That was one I was wondering ultimately what that would do. I thought it was more important to get Terry Fontenot out of there than it would have been Morris, but both of them ultimately end up getting expelled. And then the Arizona Cardinals out after 3 seasons with Jonathan Gannon. No playoff appearances will probably do that for you in a 3-14 season, worst for the franchise in the modern era. Then again, and I went back and forth with this one, to your point, it's not that it wasn't expected, but I also just feel kind of bad. He did have to field a practice squad for half of this season, and he and Mike McDaniel have these just awful quarterback situations with players that haven't worked, have had an injury history, and have horrible contracts to try to get off of. So it feels like it was kind of an uphill battle for both of those guys.
Yeah, and I think Jonathan Gannon is a bright defensive mind. I just didn't love the fit for the Arizona Cardinals. And, of course, it's a results-based business. If you're going to put out those numbers, no playoff burst, 3-14, and you are also now in this weird limbo area in terms of your quarterback spot, you're kind of moving to a different direction for that franchise. Raheem Morris was also one, Stormy, that kind of stood out to me because we have seen this dance before in Atlanta with Raheem Morris as the Falcons head coach. I'm not entirely sure why Arthur Blank continues to hire the guy just to fire the guy in about 1.5 years or now 2 years in this current tenure, but completely agree. You had to get rid of Terry Fontenot. And, of course, everything that we have seen play out with their quarterback decisions signing Kirk Cousins to the big deal, the drafting of Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall in 2024, to have Michael Penix Jr. injured with another torn ACL, look up his injury history dating back to his days in Bloomington with the Hoosiers. It is not a pretty story for what is a veteran quarterback still on that rookie contract. Now, reworking the deal with Kirk Cousins, you cannot do that as the lead man in a front office of an NFL franchise and expect to keep your job. I was surprised maybe to see Raheem Morris go, but it feels like a fresh start. Of course, all the reports that Matt Ryan is going to take a leading role to try to turn things around for this Falcons front office.
Zach Taylor will stay in Cincinnati, as will their general manager, Duke Tobin. Mike Brown calling them, in his opinion, the right guys to lead the Bengals forward. Taylor reportedly also not looking to make any other staff changes, which I did find a little bit interesting. Aaron Glenn also coming back for the Jets. That stat, by the way, about opposing, Jets opposing quarterbacks, if you were to bet them not to throw an interception all season, you bet $100 each week and rolled it over, just another one of these fun ones, would have paid you out $5.7 million. Forgive me for not crediting the account. I just wrote down the number. But how does that happen? You would think just by luck you would get an interception. Just by luck. Yeah, and your head coach is a former DB.
It is the current day iteration of the National Football League. Everybody has seen the stat. The Jets, the first team since 1933 in the NFL. I'm pretty sure they were trying to disband the forward pass at that point. 1933 to not have a single interception the entirety of a season. And we now play 17 games and 18 regular season weeks in the National Football League. I saw this stat. Forgive me if I mixed around the numbers, but I know it was fewer than 1,000 passing yards. The NFL's leading passer in 1933 threw for either 937 yards or 973 yards. We are never going to see this again. Truthfully, we are never going to see this again in the National Football League, that a defense does not get at least one interception in 17 regular season games.
Absolutely bonkers. It's truly mind-boggling. I don't know how that happens. It feels impossible to have it go that way. Just like it feels impossible to me that both Andrew Berry and Joe Schoen remain employed. That was probably the biggest surprise of this cycle to me, was that neither one of those two names ended up getting the axe.
Yeah, it's so interesting, of course, for the New York Giants as well, because the writing was on the wall at this time last year in 2025, early 2025, on the day after the regular season, Black Monday, or the NFL head coaching and front office purge, that when the Giants made their decision, the Mara family said, all right, we're bringing back Brian Daboll, we're bringing back Joe Schoen, but we have the 3rd overall pick, so we can't go after a quarterback we actually like, so we'll make something happen later in the round. And of course, we saw what happened at the end of April for Jackson Dart. The writing was on the wall from the very beginning, that if this year did not work out, if you could not shed some sort of positivity or promise for the G-men moving forward, that both of these guys, because they came in tandem together with the relationship dating back to their days working in Buffalo together, would be gone. So why one is gone in Brian Daboll, who I don't actually think was the main issue for New York, and Joe Schoen remains, really, really kind of boggles the mind in terms of the decision-making. And that is, of course, most important. I rolled my eyes, Stormy, when you mentioned Zach Taylor and what Mike Brown had to say about the Bengals. If you have a bad franchise in the National Football League, it's easy to point at the roster, the players, the quarterback, the head coach, the coaching staff, even the front office. But if you have idiots in the room in terms of your ownership, you are going to consistently be bad forever if they are not making the correct decisions. So for the Mara family not to get rid of Joe Schoen, that's a mistake. And of course, it's not a surprise that Mike Brown retains his good buddy in Duke Tobin to stay there, but that's a mistake as well. But that's a family and an organization run by nepotism. It's why the Bengals can't really have nice things.
That's why it'll never get better. But let's hear from Joe Schoen, shall we, real quickly on the podium.
Early on I made mistakes. I'm fortunate to have great ownership here where you're allowed to stub your toe and try to course correct. And over the last couple of years, we've been able to add a franchise quarterback. You've been able to add a number one receiver in Malik Neighbors, who again I'm looking forward to getting him back. And there are the defensive line, the pass rushers. There's pieces in place that also make this an attractive job. So looking at where we're going, where the build is, what the plan is moving forward, and seeing the vision through is why I think that's the case, Art.
So I do agree that he's made a couple of good draft picks. I like Jackson Dart. I like Malik Neighbors. Abdul Carter is a contender for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But and the acknowledgement of making mistakes. But some of the mistakes you've made, like, it's not little mistakes. You outbid yourself because there was nobody else in the market for Daniel Jones to pay him when there was absolutely no need to do that. Because you elect to pay him, you basically choose him over Saquon Barkley, who then you not only let walk, but walk to a division rival who ends up being the missing puzzle piece for them to win a freaking Super Bowl that very year. And then you keep Brian Daboll, which I wouldn't mind if it wasn't just to draft your next quarterback of the future, only to fire him mid-season. So the decision-making time after time after time has only resulted in failure. And how long have they been trying to rebuild this offensive line, by the way? Because that's still not working.
They've been trying to rebuild that offensive line forever. And Stormy, that's my issue with the Jackson Dart selection at the end of the first round this past April. If you were going to make that move to trade back into the opening round, how valuable that draft capital is in the National Football League, Jackson Dart, in partnership with Brian Daboll, had to be your guy because you have the quarterback, the head coach, and the GM often all tied together in the triumvirate to try to lead any sort of positivity into an offseason. And now Jackson Dart saw all the regression in the tail end of the year after Brian Daboll was fired, and yet Joe Schoen still remains the guy. And the Giants, of course, are not going to be selecting one or two to maybe even draft a quarterback for the future. But that also might be an asinine decision because you drafted Jackson Dart at the end of the first round the year prior. A lot of it doesn't make sense, but that's New York Giants football, at least the last 5 to 10 years.
Okay, I know we got a little talk radio here for a moment. We'll get back to the betting odds in the next segment, but these are all things that are percolating in our minds right now that'll make us think about how we want to approach betting teams in the future. So wanted to make sure we got some of that info out there. We're going to step aside. When we come back, we have serious thoughts on the CFP semifinal games, both of them getting underway. We'll discuss it all next.
So you're listening to this podcast because you want an edge. But what if I told you you're only halfway there? You've got the mindset. Now it's time to get the toolkit to match. Here's the thing. Pro bettors spend thousands on data and tools. But what they don't want you to know is that you can get the same edge for a fraction of the cost with VSiN Pro. VSiN Pro gives you access to expert picks, public betting data, prop projections, powerful tools, analytics, and more. Just tap the link in the description and see why thousands of bettors are already using VSiN Pro to cash more bets.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
ProfitX, the #1 sports prediction market, has some of the best future pricing you're going to find on the college football playoff, national championship, or the Super Bowl, with a huge holiday slate shaping playoff seeding, and now we are set. It's the perfect time to get it and take advantage of ProfitX's 20% purchase match. Download ProfitX today and experience the future of winning. Use the promo code VSiN to get started. That's VSIN when you download ProfitX today if you want to get that 20% purchase match. And speaking of college football playoff national championship, we crowned a national champion last night in the FCS ranks, and now we're just a couple weeks away from doing the same in the CFP. 4 teams remaining in the field, a couple of great semifinals we've got coming up this weekend in the Fiesta and Peach Bowl. Here is a look at your odds for the national title right now. Indiana, your favorite at +130. Miami +310, Oregon +320, and then Ole Miss, your long shot at 6-1. And maybe let's start with that Ole Miss-Miami game because it's going to be the first game coming up on Thursday. Miami, a team, Ben, that feels like they're really peaking at the right time, fresh off the win in the quarters as a 9.5-point dog against Ohio State, the defending national champs. They do get 1 day of extra rest, taking on a team, though, that is getting pretty hot themselves and has, I love the way Josh Pate put this, maybe not the best quarterback remaining, but certainly the most dangerous the way that he has been playing.
Trinidad Chambliss has been unreal, throwing for more than 325 yards and 2 touchdowns against Georgia. A UGA secondary and frankly pass defense because of a lack of pass rush that had been exposed at times, but it really shored things up later in the season. So to see Chambliss do that in the Big Easy, in that Sugar Bowl, to pull off that performance was rather stunning. And of course, the numbers were great. 3 total touchdowns in the victory against Tulane in the college football playoff opener. Stormy, the key to me in this game has really been the key for my thoughts on Miami the entirety of this season. It is a front seven now led by Corey Hetherman. that was also elite defending the run and getting after the quarterback a year ago. When you have guys like Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, that is going to be a consistent returning production for the defensive side of the football. We mentioned it with Adam earlier. Chambliss was sacked twice against the Green Wave, was not touched really, and Georgia only had 3 TFLs as a team as well in that matchup in the college football playoff quarterfinal. Miami sacked Marcel Reed 7 times and got to Julian Sayin 5 times. By the way, Ohio State allowed 10 of their 16 sacks in total this season in the Big Ten title game against Indiana and in the college football playoff quarters against Miami. But it speaks to that front 7 strength for the Canes. Can Miami complicate things for Trinidad Chambliss? And I think they will have a good chance of containing Kejuan Lacey, who has been sensational for Ole Miss, of course, this year as well. Because of that front 7, if the strength wins out for Miami, I would lay the 3.5 with the Canes in this spot. But if Ole Miss continues to prove me wrong, as they have all year when I have looked to fade them at many a juncture, then I think the Rebs have a great chance because of the quarterback play from Trinidad Chambliss to play for a national championship about a week plus after.
Yeah, that's what I've kind of been wrestling with here, too, with the Chambliss of it all to begin with, because you look at him in the Sugar Bowl and it's like a creative player, all the crazy stuff that he's doing, whether it's with his arm or just evading pressure with his legs. But I wonder how much of that is sustainable against a defense like Miami. And there were some of those plays against Georgia's defense where he's running for his life. And if he trips and falls or if the right guy catches a foot, like that's a negative 26-yard play instead of the masterful moment that he ultimately ended up making it. You look at some of the metrics for this Miami defense. They are 3rd in college football in opponent points per game allowed. They're the best in college football sacking the quarterback, 9th in takeaways, giving up 17 points or fewer in 6 straight games now, 24 total points allowed in their last 3 combined. And I don't know if maybe you want to, for Ohio State, say the long layoff played into this a little bit, but they were just so much more physical and they looked so much faster than Ohio State. And if I was Ole Miss, that's something that would be a big concern for me against this Miami team.
Ohio State really struggled in each of the last 2 games, their 2 losses this year, of capitalizing on good offensive possessions. Of course, the pick 6 on the screen pass for Ohio State's Julian Sayin in that second quarter, leading to a 14-0 lead for Miami. And even later in the game, getting inside the Canes' 10-yard line and being unable to convert was a story, I thought, for the Buckeyes really throughout. We saw it in the Big Ten championship as well. What's really interesting about Miami offensively, Mark Fletcher Jr. has taken over as that lead back and frankly has been a workhorse in the college football playoff. Ole Miss last year, second best rush defense in the sport, only allowing a tick over 80 yards per game throughout the regular season. This year, that number was closer to $150 on the ground, but they've been pretty good against both Tulane, who did put up some yardage against them, around 450, I believe it was, in that opener in Oxford. And Georgia had some success, not so much on the ground. Mark Fletcher Jr. is going to be the lead for that Shannon Dawson offensive scheme. But anytime it comes to Miami winning a significant game, you look at the quarterback in Carson Beck. Stormy, you know this well. 6 of the 10 interceptions for Beck this year in the 2 losses for Miami, 4 against Louisville and multiple against SMU as well. He has been clean, although not overwhelming in terms of his production in the college football playoff. A touchdown with 0 interceptions in both of the 2 games against A&M and against a really good Buckeyes defense that was on a historic pace, the best that we have seen in nearly a half century entering that matchup in the Cotton Bowl. If Carson Beck plays clean and that Miami defensive front, as we have shared, can get after Trinidad Chambliss and complicate the offense, and we believe Charlie Weiss Jr. is going to call the plays for that matchup for Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl, I lean with Miami. I would lay the 3. I would lay the 3.5. If Chambliss continues to pull off things that make Sean McDonough lose his voice, then that's going to be meaningful for Ole Miss on the other side.
Like there's something special about having a moment like that and getting the little voice crack. Not full-blown Gus Johnson, right? But just like the little really feeling the emotion of the moment. I love that from Sean in that moment. And to your point about Carson Beck, I have been very critical of him at times. But since their last loss, 13 touchdowns, just 1 interception. He has been protected well. He has been efficient. See if maybe that can get them over the hump here. Again, 3.5 that spread in favor of Miami, total 52.5. And it's been going up. We talked with Adam about that. He mentioned 51.5. There is still one of those available, but we're going up across the board. That game, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, ESPN. Thursday. Same time, same network on Friday. We've got Oregon and Indiana in the Peach Bowl. Indiana laying 3.5, total 46.5 here. Rematch, of course, from back in October. Hoosiers win that game 30-20 in Eugene at Autzen Stadium against Texas Tech last week. So the Red Raiders were getting bet. End up seeing a flip of favorites by kickoff. People were buying in on Texas Tech against this Oregon team. Yet they come out and end up playing outstanding defense in this one. The offense just had missed opportunity after missed opportunity. If you want to keep up with this Indiana team, you have to, when you're in the 35, you have to walk away with points. You can't have 5 possessions within that range and not do anything with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the story for the Ducks in that game as well against Texas Tech that we talked about similarly with Ohio State against Miami. That was also the story for Oregon in the college football playoff opener against JMU, that Dante Moore pick 6 when it looked like they were going to open things up by at least a 5-touchdown margin. Stormy, for many of the reasons, as you saw up close and personal in that Orange Bowl, that a lot of people were highlighting Texas Tech and how elite they were defensively, and I believe the Red Raiders were. I had not lost faith in Tosh Lupoi and that Ducks defense that I think often is overlooked because of its physicality. In defense, although we saw 50 total points in the first matchup inside Autzen between Oregon and Indiana, was a big thing and will continue to be a big thing here in this Peach Bowl. Because in that game, Indiana held Oregon to only 267 total yards. It is still the fewest in a single game in the 4 years of the Dan Lanning era in Eugene. But Oregon on the other side held Indiana, who we saw absolutely physically dominate Alabama in the Rose Bowl to the tune of 50 rushing attempts for nearly 250 yards on the ground, to only 110 in that matchup, just over 3 yards per pop. This defense is going to be key for the Ducks to stay within this game and take advantage offensively against the best red zone defense in the sport, as they have been all year long. Go watch the Big Ten championship game, of course, against Ohio State and everything they did to Alabama in Pasadena just under a week ago. I lean Indiana, but I've had a lot of belief in this Oregon side all year. To me, and I ask you this question, Stormy, is this the national championship game? As in, whoever wins the Peach Bowl is going to end up winning the national championship against the winner of Miami and Ole Miss?
It's a great question, and it kind of does feel that way, in my opinion. And we can ask that question to Wes Reynolds on the other side of this break as well. He, of course, is a proud Hoosier. He was at the Rose Bowl, very, very excited about the position that they are in, the way that they have made history to this point. Real quickly, we got about 45 seconds before we have to hit that break. There's been a lot of transfer portal news, especially with quarterbacks. Any one that you've been most intrigued or excited about the potential for going into next year?
Yeah, there's so much to like in the Big Ten right now. Not a surprise to see Rocco Becht follow his head coach to go from Iowa State to Penn State. That will solidify things for the Nittany Lions. I think the big news is in Lincoln, Nebraska, to see Kenny Minchie commit to the Huskers and then flip yesterday the Notre Dame transfer to Kentucky. What do the Huskers do at that QB spot with a few names rumored out there like a DJ Lagway? We shall see what happens. But a lot that I think is interesting, including Josh Hoover going to Indiana. What a transfer portal class it has been for the national championship favorites.
A lot of money changing hands as well. Brendan Sorsby cashing in at Texas Tech. Byron Brown upgrading from USF to Auburn. It's going to be fun going into next year.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Tuesday, alongside Ben Stevens, Stormy Buonantony with you as we welcome you back to Money Moves on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Very excited to welcome in VSiN's own Wes Reynolds on the Progressive guest line, host, analyst, writer, also with the PGA Tour season right around the corner, albeit a week delayed. Make sure, if you don't already, you've got the Long Shots podcast in the automatic downloads, the premier golf betting podcast across the country. Wes, I'm setting the table to welcome you in, but I got to let Ben start us off here with Indiana in the semifinal. Ben, what did you want to say to Wes?
Wes, I promised at the very beginning of this show, as we were showing the rundown for it, that I would do something, and if you will oblige me and partake, I would be honored. Who?
Who's yours?
Let's go.
Great stuff, Wes. Thank you. Thank you sincerely.
Before we get into the matchup coming up this week, Wes, I got to ask about your experience at the Rose Bowl. How was it, being there for that game and in the fashion with which Indiana took control?
Well, Stormy, you've covered the Rose Bowl before, and there's nothing like it. I mean, they call it the granddaddy of them all for a reason. Not because the stadium seats are all that comfortable, and not because it's a brand new stadium, because it's not, or because the cell service and the Wi-Fi is terrible, but you can't beat that view. You can't beat that view of the San Gabriel Mountains, especially when the sun comes out, which it wasn't out in the morning during the Rose Parade as we were all getting drenched. And it's a lot more fun when your team's kicking the other team's backside. And it was just enjoyable to see Indiana just take over Southern California. I think it was about an 80-20 split. And around late third quarter, all the Crimson Tide fans started leaving. So it was all Hoosier fans. And just, the Mellencamp blasting over the loudspeaker and us all singing along. You couldn't have asked for a more perfect day, I think, at the Rose Bowl for Indiana.
Felt like New Year's Day on Kirkwood Avenue in Bloomington when you've got the Cougar out there in Indiana winning by 35 against Alabama. Wes, I think for many people maybe following college football or diving more in now in the college football playoff, that win, a 35-point victory against the Crimson Tide, solidifies what Curt Cignetti has done in this remarkable and historic 2-year turnaround in Bloomington. But for me, it was the victory back in the middle of October, the first ever AP Top 5 road victory in the history of Hoosiers football in Eugene against Oregon. A rematch between two Big Ten foes in the college football playoff semifinal in Atlanta on Friday night in the Peach Bowl. How closely do you think this game on Friday in the semifinal will mirror what we saw a couple of months ago in Eugene?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very darn close, Ben. It's kind of the Hoosiers keep ripping them off and getting more and more believers. There's still some out there that aren't convinced. Paul Feinbaum, maybe he's more convinced after the Rose Bowl. Who knows? But I think it's going to be similar. I think the game is probably going to be a little bit more low scoring. It's tough to say it's going to be a high scoring game for Indiana when you look at the three teams they played that reached the quarterfinals, including Oregon, 13 points. Ohio State, 10 points, and then Alabama, just the 3 in the Rose Bowl. That's less than 9 points a game that this defense has given up against 3 of the top 8 teams in the country. So that's why I think you see a total at 47, because it seems like, okay, fast track down there in Atlanta indoors, that it should be a shootout, but I'm not convinced of it. And then I want to see how Oregon is going to be able to run the ball better, because now they're at more of a deficit, because it broke actually during the beginning of your guys' show that Jordan Davison looks like he has a broken clavicle and is not going to play. So that leaves the Ducks with 2 healthy running backs. So if the Ducks can't run the ball, Indiana can get pressure. They are number 4 in pressure rate, I think about 47% and change. And they got to Dante Moore 6 times. So it's going to be a war, and it's going to be close. And I would expect that we're getting a better Ducks team than we got in Eugene back in October. But I think just the difficulty of running the ball is going to put Oregon kind of behind the chains here a lot against this really good defense.
You are going to be going out to Atlanta to see this thing in person for the Peach Bowl. Is it harder and that much more stressful if you want to bet on your team and you're actually going to be there?
It is a little bit more stressful as we take that midnight train to Georgia, Stormy, to watch this, because now we're close. Because Indiana has already won the Big Ten title for the first time since 1945 outright, and then won the Rose Bowl. So I'm talking with my friends as we were leaving the stadium. It's like everything else is just gravy. But now we're here, and it's like you want it all. To get this close, you got to finish the job. So it is a little bit more stressful, and I have a lot of respect for Oregon. Oregon can absolutely win this game, and really when you look at the two spreads at just a little over 3, all 4 of these teams can win this game. But I think Indiana is the rightful favorite. Like, I feel like this is the team that should finish the deal. If you had Ohio State or a Georgia or more of a mainstay program with the profile that the Hoosiers have, I think they'd be laying a bigger number. I think they'd be laying 6 to Oregon here. So Indiana still has the doubters, but I think that they like that. I think that Curt Cignetti thrives upon that there's still the doubters out there, and they just keep ripping them off one at a time.
That line back in mid-October in Autzen opened at 7 in favor of Oregon, touched double digits early in the week. Indiana, of course, winning outright as an underdog, solidifying that they are the true number 1 team in the country. The Indiana football Hoosiers, a plus 130 price to win a national championship. So yes, Wes, they are now expected to go home as a national champ this year. As we wait for the college football playoff semifinal to begin on Thursday night, A great slate of college basketball all around the country, deeper into conference action in the sport right now in early January. Let's talk about one of the best games on this Tuesday evening. Top 20 tilt at the Center in Louisville. Number 20 Louisville hosts number 6 Duke, and it's basically a pick'em whichever way you slice it on that number. Minus 115 as I'm seeing it now, slightly in favor of the Cards at home tonight against the Blue Devils. Wes, it's a pick'em. Who wins this top 20 bout tonight?
Yeah, Ben, I think these are the clear two best teams in the ACC, by the way, Duke and Louisville. And I'm going to go with U of L. I'm going to go with the Cards here tonight. Duke's defense, as impressive as Duke has been, they took that one loss to Texas Tech in the Garden where credit the Red Raiders for coming back. But that game really showed, I think, maybe some chink in the armor in the Duke defense. And I think that they can get it back on track. Maybe not here, though, because if you look, they beat Georgia Tech by 6, but they gave up 79 and gave up 1.1 points per possession. And then against Florida State, who'd really been struggling, the Noles got 87 on them, and I think it was 1.25 points per possession. So this Duke defense, and we know it's tough for freshmen to play defense, and you got a freshman-laden team here with Duke with, essentially 3 starters that are true freshmen. And I think it's going to be hard for them. I know no Brown for Louisville tonight, but I think they've got the veterans to make that up with Hadley, who can create off the dribble. So I like U of L at home tonight.
We've also got 12-1 UCF at Oklahoma State today. Oklahoma State looking to rebound from an ugly loss, albeit against a really good opponent in Texas Tech, 102-80. In this matchup, they're slight favorite at home, 2.5, total 174.5. How are you approaching this one?
Yeah, I played money line here with Oklahoma State, Stormy. UCF has now they're beating Kansas on a regular basis down there in Orlando. Did it now a couple years in a row, but going to Oklahoma State, who just gave up over $100 to Texas Tech, probably going to be a track meet here with a total in the high 170s. It's really hard to win on the road in the Big 12. I think it's probably the hardest conference in all of college basketball to win on the road here. And I like Oklahoma State to bounce back. They have multiple scorers on this team. They like to get up and down, as does UCF. I think Oklahoma State a little bit faster tempo, but they've got a lot of guys that can score the ball. Anthony Roy, who played for Doug Gottlieb at Green Bay last year, now playing for Gottlieb's alma mater at Oklahoma State. Kanye Clary, the Penn State transfer, Victorious Miller. They've got several guys that can get buckets on this team, and they're going to get just enough. I think they take down UCF tonight.
If you have not seen Steve Lutz and the Pokes yet this year, they play fast. It is why the total tonight in Stillwater is 174 and a hook. The opposite of fast, Wes, is probably a Big Ten battle in the barn tonight in the Twin Cities between Minnesota and Iowa. 2 really good offenses in terms of efficiency, especially for the Hawkeyes under Ben McCollum, now number 19 in the country. But again, not the fastest teams in the sport. What's the approach tonight for Iowa and Minnesota in the Twin Cities?
Yeah, Ben, you and I are Big Ten guys, of course, and we were kind of wondering about Iowa. How are they going to be this year? We know Ben McCollum can coach his you-know-what off. He's won everywhere he's been, but was he going to be able to take those Drake players from the Missouri Valley and essentially Division II players where he was before he was at Drake? Was he able going to take them to Iowa? And, much more athleticism in the Big Ten. Well, so far, so good. And the answer is a resounding yes for Iowa. But I think that this is going to be a rock fight with 2 very good coaches, not only McCollum at Iowa, but Nico Medved comes back home to his alma mater at University of Minnesota. So Minnesota's gotten a little bit of money. This was 6, and now it's down to 5 pretty much across the board. I played Iowa team total under 69. I think that this is going to be low 60s, traditional, slug it out Big Ten game, and we'll see if Iowa gets a road win. Indiana couldn't do it earlier this year in the barn. We'll see if Iowa can. Big Ten, not easy to win on the road.
Wes, safe travels out there to Atlanta, and I know that everybody in the golf community is really sad that we don't have the Century going this week, but maybe it's best for you not to have your attention divided, that you can just be football-focused for Indiana.
We'll be on to the Sony, and hopefully the Hoosiers on to the national championship in Miami.
Yeah, we need to see you in Miami. Awesome stuff as always. Appreciate your time. Thanks for this, Wes.
Thanks, guys.
Wes Reynolds, everybody. And that's a great tee-up reminder, once again, Long Shots podcast. You got to make sure you're in there. He, Kelly, the whole group, they do an unbelievable job, and they're going to get you set each and every week of the season. We got to step aside. Our best bets coming up after this as we round out this Tuesday edition of Money Moves.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Before the line moves, remember everybody, the Sharp Plays is already there. January isn't just about volume, it's about precision, okay? The NFL playoffs are where limits rise, mistakes shrink, and timing matters more than ever. You're not going to outsmart billion-dollar sportsbooks or full-time sharps on your own, but with the Sharp Plays, you don't have to. Powered by advanced AI, connected to proven insider sources, and locked in on the NFL postseason. The Sharp Plays helps identify where sharp money hits before the number disappears. You get free daily reports, real-time alerts, and market-moving insights, all delivered straight to your inbox or X feed. And they've been backing it up with those documented results since 2011. Public logs, transparent receipts, sharpplays.com. Trusted by the pros, monitored by the book. Stay ahead of the line this postseason at sharpplays.com. Stormy Buonantony, Ben Stevens with you. Back here on Money Moves. And we were talking in one of the breaks earlier, Ben, about the rating that the Rose Bowl ultimately got between Indiana and Alabama. And I saw the stat that it was definitely it was more than the semifinals last year. And then it was most watched CFP game in the 12-team format. And then I just saw Chris Vanini tweet the Rose Bowl, again, a 38-3 game, had more viewers than 4 of the last 5 national championship games and 7.5 million more than the NBA Finals Game 7. Like, how awesome is that? And for everybody that says, oh, like NIL and all these things have ruined college football, are there a lot of things that need to get fixed? Absolutely. But this is the most popular the sport's ever been.
Welcome to the new age, folks, where Indiana football is the number one team in the country, the national championship favorites, and perhaps the biggest needle mover when it comes to television ratings in the entirety of the sport. Look at our Final Four. Look at the college football playoff semifinal. Everybody has seen the stats. It's the first CFP semis, including all the 4-team era for the decade, where we do not have Ohio State, Alabama, nor Clemson playing. That is how cool this is, and we are very lucky to enjoy it all. It is very fun to see new teams have an opportunity. IU and Oregon have never won a national championship. Ole Miss has never won a national championship outright. They split back in 1960 with Minnesota. Sometimes I wonder if magazine writers had it right instead of a committee, but we'll save that for another day. And Miami has not won a national championship since 2001. We have fresh blood playing in this new era. It is diversified where the talent is. We are seeing the top 2 portal destinations in the sport early here be Bloomington, Indiana, and West Texas, specifically Lubbock. It is a good time. There is a lot that needs to be figured out, as Stormy has said. But the actual games, when they are on, are thrilling. Even when they're not thrilling, they generate a lot of enthusiasm and audience engagement, which is awesome to see as well.
No question about it. Love the new blood. And obviously, I'm on the heels of the FCS national championship game yesterday, so I can't help but also think you see Montana State win the national championship at the FCS level for the first time since 1984. Illinois State in that game for just the second time. And if they would have been able to win, it would have been the first in program history. It's so fun to see these types of programs have their moment and have that stage and have the opportunity. And also, speaking of the FCS, their playoff format seems to work out pretty well. So maybe if the bowl system could kind of get in alignment here, we could have a little bit of fun and expand this thing the right way. That said, we've only got a couple minutes left here on the program, Ben, and I know you've added some bets to the account. We were just talking last segment with our guy Wes Reynolds about that Iowa-Minnesota game, and you have fired on a play in this one as well. Where are you going?
Wes and I, despite being Big Ten brethren, might see it slightly differently tonight inside the barn. Technically, we could both hit, but that would be a closer game than the odds makers are expecting if that is the case. I actually went over Stormy 132.5. I saw the number earlier on this Tuesday morning at 131.5 between Minnesota and Iowa. I mentioned it. There are 365 D1 men's college basketball teams playing in 2025-26. These two teams rank in the bottom 30 or 35 in terms of slowest tempos around the nation this year. But Iowa, more efficient offensively than that of Minnesota, who has to figure things out defensively in year number 1 under a great head coach in Nico Medved. I'm not saying this is an 85-80 shootout tonight in the barn by any means, but I do think we can get both teams into the mid-60s, if not higher. I went over 131.5, now at 132.5. I don't even mind that additional point if you want to join me.
Let's stick with hoops because St. John's, another play that you've added to the account, laying the number in a bounce back spot following the loss to Providence the other day. They're at Butler today. What put you on that side?
This is a St. John's team, Stormy, that started the year number 5 in the country in the preseason AP poll because of all the returning and additional talent in Queens for Rick Pitino. And 5 is a consistent number with the Johnnies. It's 5 losses already in their first 14 games, 9-5 for the Red Storm. They need to bounce back. They had a double-digit lead early against Providence inside the Garden on Saturday. Dustin and I were live for Live Bet Saturday. That line quickly ballooned from 13.5 to 21.5 live, and Providence comes all the way back to win outright as a double-digit dog in the Garden. St. John's needs to start winning and utilize that talent, led by Zuby Ejiofor, the returner, led by Bryce Hopkins, the Providence transfer, Ian Jackson back home in the Empire State, the North Carolina transfer, to figure things out quickly before things turn completely against St. John's in Big East play. I think they do that tonight in Hinkle against a Butler team that's not terrible under Thad Matta this year, but not great defensively. The pace is going to be up. I think St. John's can cover as a 4.5-point road favorite unless there's some Hinkle magic tonight in Indianapolis.
Should be a pretty fun college basketball day, but we are not out of the woods yet when it comes to the NFL slate. As we are entering the postseason, we got wild card weekend upon us. And with that, we were having the conversation earlier about the path for some teams and things that we might want to approach even now in the futures market. What did you add to the account NFL-wise going into this weekend?
Yeah, I think the stage of elimination market is a very fun way to approach how you think that path from a numbers perspective is exactly going to play out. I am very high on the Los Angeles Rams. In fact, I think if the defense looks a little bit more like weeks 1 through 13 instead of 14 through 18 in this last month, that LA can win a Lombardi trophy, and I would have them as my favorites in front of Seattle. But to win an NFC championship, heck, to even get to that conference title game, to have the opportunity to play for a Super Bowl spot, they're going to have to beat Seattle. The Rams, a double-digit favorite, of course, this weekend against the Carolina Panthers. Even if the Panthers cover, I expect the Rams to win that game rather comfortably. So then you set up the Rams and the Seahawks in that divisional round. So we'll look at Seattle's component of this, plus 160 to be eliminated, knocked out of the playoffs in their very first game, despite playing in front of the 12s in the Pacific Northwest, knocked out in the divisional round. I like that number now because it's basically a moneyline price, plus 160 on the Rams to get to the conference championship for a spread that I think will be around 1.5, 2 points or so for that divisional round rematch between Seattle and Los Angeles for a third time this year. And quickly, I'll add the Buffalo Bills plus 475 to win the AFC Championship. I'm going to trust in Josh Allen. I'm going to trust in the Bills playing good football away from Western New York. They have not won a road playoff game in over 30 years since January of 1993. But the path is there finally for Buffalo to execute, play for an AFC championship, and earn a Super Bowl spot. I like the number, 4th best of our 7 AFC playoff teams at plus 475 on Josh Allen and the Bills.
Man, I would love it for him, just as we talked about earlier, especially knowing that this is the year where you don't have to go through what has been your kryptonite in the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, and there's no Lamar Jackson and no Joe Burrow. Like, it feels so set up, yet I don't know if this team has it. So I'm rooting for you because I would love it for Josh Allen. I would love it for Buffalo Bills fans. Like, they deserve good things. They are drinking liquor out of bowling balls and breaking tables. They need something good, Ben.
Yeah, they do. Labatt, very good, by the way. If you ever make your way to upstate New York, a wonderful beer. Yeah. Stormy, for that component, right, it is that path for Buffalo that I believe in at the number it currently is. For instance, if the Bills had the second best price, a couple of cents behind the Broncos, the 1 seed in the AFC for that conference championship number, I probably would not bet it. But with where things are for the Bills, and it's a difficult path, as I highlighted the road woes in playoffs past, for this Buffalo side. Josh Allen, by the way, 0-4, both straight up and against the number in those road playoff games. And yet I am telling you to believe in Buffalo. It's the number. It's the idea that this could be the year, a potential divisional round rematch against New England. They've already won in Foxborough this year. And I've been trying to fade the Denver Broncos for a lot of this NFL season and have had to eat it just ever so slightly. I do not believe in them as the true 1 seed, despite having home field advantage at Mile High.
fourth quarter Bo Nix killed a lot of us that wanted to fade the Broncos this year. So I am right there with you. But I mean, you look at those teams at the top of the AFC, the Broncos are a team that to your point, I haven't fully believed in. The Patriots, given the schedule that they've played, not only was it the easiest in the NFL this year, it was the easiest in a quarter century in the NFL. So how real are they really? I love what I've seen for Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. That's why I'm a little bit hesitant with this first game for Buffalo. But generally speaking, that side of things feels like there's a lot of opportunity for whoever can find a way to elevate in the playoffs. Fun day, Ben. Pleasure working with you for the first time. And we will be back at it again tomorrow. So hopefully you weren't too sick of me having to slum it with me today.
No, I had a great time, Stormy. Great to meet you. Great to work with you. Please get a nap, and we will be ready for Wednesday here on Monday.
Yes, just get you. You think my energy was good today? I was all hopped up on caffeine. Just wait till I'm well rested. For Ben Stevens, our producer Justin Emery, I'm Stormy Buonantony. Keep it locked right here. Follow the money coming up next.